Hi everyone, welcome to GM Arun Chess channel. In this part 3 video of the Sicilian defense, we'll be discussing the Taimanov variation, the Khan variation, the 4 knights and the pin variation. Let's begin with the Taimanov. E4, C5, knight f3, and in the part 1 video of the Sicilian defense we discussed d6, and in part 2 we discussed knight c6, and in this video we'll be discussing the lines after e6. White continues with d4, c takes d4, knight takes d4. Black continues with knight c6. So we are not into Taimanov waters yet, um, but after knight c3, queen c7, more or less we are into the Taimanov line. Like in all the Sicilian variations, if white wishes to take a very safe and solid approach, white players can always go with bishop e2 short castle, and the main lines usually continue with bishop e3 with the plan of queen d2 long castle f3 g4 h4 plan, which is very close to the English attack in the Knight of variation and the Yugoslav attack in the Dragon system. These structures were the main lines, and after bishop e3 a6, white players started playing relatively a strange move, queen f3. The move looks like an amateurish move, but it is not so bad. In fact, it has a lot of venom in it. The point of queen f3 is to prepare for queen g3 and basically like get this head g3 after queen g3 and opening up of the h file, and white basically starts expanding on the king side, and usually white has a very pleasant position after that. This queen f3 move came into being in the last few years, and maybe we can even consider this as the main line, and it's pretty aggressive. But apart from this, white players more or less have played almost all the options, starting with bishop d3, f4, knight c6, a3 in this position. They all lead into different plans and different ideas, but these days, black players, if you're playing the Taimanov, you have to be well prepared, as almost all lines are reasonable tries for the white side. And just like knight off, Taimanov also, like, if you have to play as black, you have to be very clear with your model games and plans. Only then you can successfully handle this from black's perspective. Now, coming back to another approach that white players can play against the Taimanov after knight c6 is with knight b5, preparing for knight d6, and when black plays d6, white goes with c4. Once again, we see this Maroczy-Bind structure. This plan with c4 after knight b5 used to be the favorite of Anatoly Karpov during his prime years. He used this extensively with tremendous success. The usual plans with knight c3, bishop e3, bishop e2, short castle. All the plans in the Maroczy-Bind structure will apply to this position as well, as white has more space and black will be trying to achieve the a6 b5 pawn break or the d5 pawn break. But as long as white has the space, white should be happy with it. But if black achieves a central pawn break, then usually white may get into trouble. So this is one direction to go for the white players if they wish to play this against the Taimanov. And after knight c6, knight c3, knight f6 is heading towards, this is the 4 knights variation in the Sicilian defense. Now white has two approaches. One, they can stay in the 4 knights variation with knight c6, or they can try to go into Sveshnikov variation, direct transposition to Sveshnikov with knight b5. Once again threatening knight d6, and there is one line that black players can play with bishop c5, avoiding the Sveshnikov transposition. But apart from that, d6, bishop f4, e5, bishop g5, a6, knight a3, b5. This is a direct transposition to the Sveshnikov. In the part 2 video, we briefly spoke about this position. Now, one question is, what is the difference with this move order and the other move order? As we know, The regular move order for the Sveshnikov starts with nc6, d4, cd4, knight d4, knight f6, knight c3, e5, knight b5, d6. Now, white has this option of knight d5, which is mainly which played these days extensively by the white players. When black comes up with the 4 knights move order, he manages to avoid this extra option that white players have. But with the regular move order with the Sveshnikov, certainly white keeps this extra option. And moving on with e6, and certainly like knight c6, bishop b5, which is the Rosolimo system. In fact, mostly like if white players know black is trying to play the Sveshnikov, mostly white players are also trying to avoid the main lines with bishop b5. And I mean, these days, like even bishop b5 can be considered as the main line. Now coming back to the 4 knights variation after knight c3, knight f6, knight b5, white has the chance to transpose this into the Sveshnikov, or if he wishes to keep this in the 4 knights variation itself, he can continue with knight c6. Again, this line also is pretty complicated with e5, knight d5, knight e4. Again, here a series of forcing moves continue in this position with queen b6, c4, bishop b4, king e2. I mean, with king e2 coming in, it feels a little intimidating. But actually, in reality, this line is actually not so bad for black, and black players can also look for some counter chances in this kind of variations. But again, white also has to be very careful as you're keeping your king in the center like this. And as you can see, white has absolutely no development, and your king is already in the middle of the board. But in return, you enjoy this space advantage with very good grip in this dark squares. Usually, black react with f5 and bishop e3, queen d8, and somewhere here the line. I mean, series of forcing moves end, and a conclusion can be drawn in another few moves. And apart from this 4 knights variation, the next main line for black should be to go with a6. Again, white has a few options in this position he can continue with. The simplest one is the Moraxi-Bind structure once again. After c4, black has variety of options. Usually there are two approaches. One is the simplest approach with b6, bishop b7, d6, knight d7. These moves, which is more or less the hedgehog structure. Black will be looking for the timely central pawn break with d5 or the b5 pawn break. Or if he wishes to go with other lines with queen c7, knight c3, he always retains the option of bishop b4, bishop c5, knight f6 as well. I think the main line continues with knight f6, knight c3, and queen c7 has been tried, bishop b4 has been tried. They have also played some bishop f5, bishop c5 move in this position. A lot of options exist in this position for black. Basically, like white has to be precise with these plans that black has, and each setup that black has, white needs to come up with the correct follow-up plan. Apart from c4, bishop d3 seems to be the other main line. And here, when I checked the database, I found almost all legal options have been tried by black players. But among them, I think bishop c5 is probably the best move. At least top players have played this extensively. And after bishop c5, knight b3, bishop a7 is one approach, and bishop e7 is the other approach. But apart from this, several lines. Okay, knight f6, queen c7, b5, knight c6. Almost all the legal moves have been tried in this position. Like basically, black has a lot of flexibility in this approach in this position. And yeah, I know many black players who play this with great success, because white players exactly, unless they have a very clear idea about all these options, it's pretty easy to get confused with the plans that black players have, and somehow they end up messing up these kind of positions. But bishop d3 still remains as the critical test, and apart from that, knight c3 is the next option. Again, in this position, b5 is the main move, and apart from that, like several other options have also been tried for for black. Um, and that's where the Khan variation ends. And the final one with knight of 6, knight c3. Here d6 is the Skemenangan, which we discussed briefly in the part 1 video of the Syrian defense. And bishop b4 is the starting point of the pin variation. If you think about it, it looks quite scary at the first look, because immediately like black is threatening to win the pawn. On the other hand, he's threatening to ruin the pawn structure with bishop c3. So white is not getting the usual free play that he gets in the other lines. But bishop b4 is actually not such a precise line for black, and if white players know the correct follow-up, correct plan, usually black is in danger in these kind of lines. Usually e5 is played, and after knight d5, bishop d2. Black players have tried knight takes c3 or bishop takes c3. But to be precise, if you prepare your lines well with white, if you know the correct model games, correct plans with white side, and we can even safely say these kind of lines are refuted. But obviously you need to do your homework. If you're done with it, then certainly, like, in some occasions, even without playing a single move over the board, you might already even reach a winning position, and whatever left would be just mere execution. So pin variation is not very highly regarded. Some players play this as a surprise weapon in online games, but apart from that, it doesn't really enjoy very high popularity. And I think these are the lines that can start with e6 line. I think in the next video, I'll be discussing all the other options that black players can play. G6, the hyper accelerated dragon, or A6, they call this some O'Kelly variation. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing it right, but yeah, some other sidelines also exist, like Dragadrov. We'll briefly talk about other sidelines which are not mainstream lines, but still black players time and again play. So I think I'll discuss this in the next video. And if you guys think you have learned something useful in this video, please like, share, and subscribe this channel. And I'll catch you all in the next video. Thank you.